Jay here for Stretford Paddock, and this is the one-on-one interview. And joining us today is our resident Spanish football expert, Semra Hunter from La Liga TV. She's a presenter over there. She's going to talk to us a little bit about the Super League and how it's been received over in Spain. Semra, thanks for chatting to us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
If I can just go back to what seems like an eternity ago, but was only about a week ago, I think.
I know, right? It's done my head in.
I know, it seems like it's been on for months. When the Super League was announced, and the fact that obviously 3 of Spain's biggest clubs, if not the 3 biggest clubs, would be a part of it, what was the reaction like over in Spain?
So the initial reaction was, oh, this again. I mean, this has been going on for a long time in terms of Florentino Perez trying to put through a project like this for years. I mean, this has not been any kind of secret. He has been talking about this for a long, long, long time. It's been in the press over the years. So it was kind of like, all right, so this is happening. But then after about 24 hours, and I think when people started to realize it was actually more serious this time, that it actually held some weight, and when all of the clubs started putting out those statements saying we are now joining 12 other, 11 others, and we're going to be doing this and forming the European Super League and so on, there was definitely a lot of outrage, but it was mostly on social media. So I think to fully explain the reaction, we have to put things into a bit of context. So for one thing, the Spanish society and culture is very different from England. And the Spanish football culture is very, very different from that of England. And so in general, fans here don't quite take to the streets or go out and protest and do what we saw taking shape over in England. It's more of well, we'll sit here on the sidelines, we'll watch and applaud, and we'll encourage you to do that. But, you know, you guys get the job done for us, but we're cheering you on. So that's sort of the reaction that's been taking shape over here. Everyone's been watching the news, following what's been happening in England, and they've been very, let's say, they've been admiring what's taking shape over there. Another thing is English football, it's a way of life, you know, it's a lifestyle. People live and breathe it all the way down from the grassroots level, all the way up to the Premier League. And in Spain, it's not quite the same. And so we didn't have a champion like Gary Neville or Jamie Carragher or Rio Ferdinand coming out and publicly lambasting this idea or trying to rally the troops or trying to encourage people to take the streets. We didn't have that. In fact, everyone here was really quiet in terms of what was coming out of the clubs. So the managers didn't want to talk about it. Zidane, every time he was asked about it, he would just bat away the answer. Ronald Koeman didn't really want to talk about it. I think the most he said was that he agreed with what Piqué had put out on a tweet. And Piqué, by the way, is the only footballer over here currently active in Spain that actually made some kind of comments against this competition, but no one else has said a word. So the reaction in that sense has been quite the opposite to what was going on in England. No one has really wanted to come forward and say anything. Atletico Madrid, we can go case by case if you want. We can start with, because every club is a little bit different. So Atletico Madrid, they were kind of the last ones to jump on board with this idea, and they were the first ones in Spain to come out, because they figured, well, if everybody else is jumping ship, we might as well do the same. So they issued a statement, but they didn't really make any apologies to the fans or anything like that. They just decided, okay, we're going to come out of this because of the reaction that's been taking shape over the football world in general. And that was that. I think of the 3 fan bases, Atletico Madrid's were the most upset, both here in Spain as well as internationally. And then the players together put out a collective statement saying that they were in favor of the fact that the club decided to back out. They thought this was for the best. And that was that, more or less. Diego Simeone as well didn't really have much to say. When it came to Barcelona, it's quite different, because we all know what the financial situation is over there. They have crumbling debt, and they desperately need the money. So their whole line was, well, we really need to fix our finances. This would really do us a world of good because we desperately need to find money somewhere. This was a project that Laporta inherited from Bartomeu. But at the end of the day, Barcelona, like Real Madrid, are clubs which are owned and run by the socios, by the members. So technically, a president can't just go ahead and make this kind of unanimous decision without getting the okay, without getting the votes from the club's members, which again is very different to what happens in England. So Laporta said, we think this is something that needs to happen. This would be very good for the club. However, it's not going through unless the club's members say that it goes through. So he's kind of covered himself there. When it comes to Real Madrid, it's a totally different kettle of fish, which is why I've saved it for last. Florentino Perez, as we know, is the ringleader behind this. This has been his brainchild for many, many years. The reaction has been very different in Spain from Madridistas compared to international Real Madrid fans. I think by and large, those who are abroad were really against this idea. However, fans in Madrid were about 50-50. There were actually quite a lot who felt that this was a natural evolution, that this is something that needed to happen. They're massively in favor and in support of their president. They stand by him no matter what. They'll go to the ends of the earth with him. So if this is what he said is going to happen, then they'll go with it. And of course, there are a lot of members of the media and the press who also support him, as well as support the club. So it's been a very different tone. In some ways, they've played the victim card, and he's made himself out to feel like he's a victim, that all of these other clubs have turned their backs on him, that they pulled out of what was a brilliant idea, and this is the way of so-called saving football, according to him. And so a lot of the reaction has been largely in his favor, in supporting him and what he had to say. But of course, there is another side of the fan base who was, again, not in line with all of this and what was happening. So it's been very interesting to see all of this unfold, for sure. Every club, as I say, has been a very unique case in and of itself. The fans have been a little bit more divided over here than they are outside of Spain. But this is by no means over. We may have won the battle as fans, but the war is not over, for sure. And this will come back at some stage one day. In what kind of context and what kind of format, we don't yet know. But for sure, this is not going away. This has been put on the back burner for now.
One of the big sort of things over here, or the big reactions, wasn't just from fans of the 6 teams that were going into the Super League, but fans of other clubs were outraged as well, because they felt that this was going to ruin the English game, it was going to ruin the football pyramid, they were being left out, and it was just elitism. What's the reaction been like from the fans outside those 3 clubs? Has there been much of a reaction? Because you spoke earlier about how, English fans are more inclined to take to the streets. Just from social media and things like that, have we seen much of a reaction from the fans of the other clubs?
That's a really good point, because there has been massive backlash from all of those other clubs and fan bases as well, because they feel that they've been left out, or they've been left behind, or that this isn't fair. They've been very vocal in voicing their opinions against this and saying how much harm and how much damage it would do to football, much in the same way that clubs in England were pushing through the same narrative. It was very, very similar. I think it's an interesting thing to note as well that one of the reasons why Florentino Perez wanted to put this through, so he says, is because he doesn't feel that clubs can compete with the so-called nouveau rich. So the likes of a PSG or Manchester City, for example. But I think the problem is not a case of trying to increase the amount of money that you generate or your income. It's more about managing your money properly, which is something that we need to recognize that a lot of these clubs haven't done very well, especially in the case of several of the clubs here in Spain. And so I think a lot of the other clubs around the country have been vehemently against this, because they feel that that was just a source of greed, that it was just a sort of trying to make these clubs even wealthier, that it was just going to increase the disparity between the rich clubs and the smaller clubs. And I think there was also a source of pride being hurt. A club like Sevilla, for example, who hold a Guinness World Record for having won the Europa League 6 times, 3 of which were in a row, they were not even considered. And so you have a lot of other historic clubs like a Valencia or an athletic club who also were not necessarily considered. I mean, from a historical point of view, the biggest clubs in Spain are Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Athletic Club. And so, again, a lot of these other clubs in other parts of Spain were really not happy with this idea, and they felt that it would also lessen the quality of the domestic league and that it would do a lot of damage to the domestic league, I think, in a way that people felt that it would happen to the Premier League. And so they were very, very open in expressing how much anger they felt toward this idea. They didn't hold back whatsoever. Whereas from the other 3 that were involved in this idea, they did kind of walk a little bit more steadily, and they mince their words a little bit more about how they approach this, with the exception, of course, of Florentino Perez.
Just on Perez, I mean, over here in England, his comments have been met with a lot of shock and surprise, and people have looked at him as almost someone who's out of touch with reality. Some of the things he said about young people not being interested in football, and some of the other comments as well, and just the fact that he seemed to be persevering with this idea when it was collapsing, or it seemed to be collapsing. Has he lost a lot of faith in Madrid or in Spain? You mentioned there that there's a lot of the hardcore fans that are still backing him. What's it been like in general? Have a lot of people looked at his comments and been surprised, or is that just sort of what they almost expect from someone like Perez?
I think he lives in a bit of a bubble, which is to say that he's a very powerful man in the business world. He's a very powerful man in the football world. And I think he's used to getting his way. I think he's used to getting a yes to the things that he wants. He's not used to people actually saying, no, sorry, this doesn't work for me, or no, I don't think this is a good idea, whatever, what have you. So I think he genuinely was surprised that clubs in England decided not to go along with this, because he so fervently believes in this idea. I mean, he's so incredibly rooted to the fact that he really believes that this is for the good of football, that this is saving football, which I think all of us agree is totally ludicrous. But in terms of his reputation, let's say, within Spain, I think in the city of Madrid, it hasn't really taken much of a hit. Because, like I said, a lot of the supporters back him, a lot of the members of the media, they back him as well. He has friends in high places who I think support him as well, too. So I don't think it's really affected him in that way. I think on an international level, his reputation has been somewhat tarnished. For those who didn't necessarily know him before, didn't know what he was about or what he was like you say, I mean, the reaction in England to what he's been saying, a lot of people just laughed at it and said, you know, what is he on about? Making games shorter? I mean, what? Young people aren't interested in football anymore? Or what? I mean, some of the comments that he did make were a bit outlandish, and they were very circular, and they didn't really have much of a basis of argument behind it as well, too. And so I think it didn't do him any favors. And from what I understand, it was also kind of an incentive for some of the other clubs to back out after one of the first interview that he did, that it didn't really help his cause, so to speak. So no, again, I think that there's this sort of section of the Madrid fan base who feel that there's a campaign against him and against Real Madrid, and there's some kind of conspiracy because, you know, they're the best club in the history of football, and they have the most European Cups, and they deserve more respect, and they should be listened to, and FIFA wouldn't exist without them, and all these kinds of things. So they do sort of live in their own different parallel universe, we could say, to a degree. So I think in his inner circle, he'll still be revered and respected and looked to much in the way that he always has. But I think internationally, people will look at him in a different way, and perhaps he's also lost a bit of the power that he did have when it comes to UEFA, in that sort of European level of power, let's say, to some degree. Real Madrid.
You've mentioned there the fact that Perez still believes in this project. He still believes in it. He still has the backing of a lot of the fans. You've mentioned about Barcelona's difficulties and sort of the financial problems they're in, and obviously the Super League. There was a lot of money involved. What's the next step for them in this? You said that this might happen in the future in some other way. Do you think they're likely to try and make it happen again soon? Do you think they have to take a step back? Because over here in England, it seems like obviously this is all just done. It's over. It's not happening for the time being, at least. What's the feeling there with those two sort of, the two biggest clubs, if not in Spain, the two of the biggest clubs in the world?
I think there's this feeling that this is just being put on hold. And the statement from Barcelona says as much. They didn't really ever say they were pulling out of this. And Laporta has openly said he still very believes in this idea and wants to explore it further because he does feel that this is going to help them financially. Real Madrid haven't issued any kind of statement at all saying that they're backing out of this or not. They haven't said anything. Florentino Perez is, quite frankly, the only person, let's say, president, CEO, owner, whatever, to have actually come out publicly and talked about this. And he's not going to let this lie. I think in the short term, he has no other choice, and the clubs in Spain have no other choice but to let this go, because you can't have a league with just two teams, except that, they already exist in La Liga and we already have a Super League. So, they play against one another regularly there every single season. But clearly the backlash that happened in England, I don't think it's going to happen again soon, because it started with Project Big Picture. That was squashed pretty quickly. This was a second attempt for something to happen on a much bigger layer. And this was even worse. So I think in England, for sure, clubs are going to be staying well clear away from something like this for a while. I think, however, Florentino Perez is a man on a mission, and he'll try and find a way to convince clubs down the road to make something like this happen. Will it take a few years, 5 years, 10 years? I don't know. But it'll be interesting now to see what happens with UEFA, because the problems in football haven't magically just disappeared because this whole thing collapsed. The disparity still exists. The power is still in the hands of a few. Players, managers, fans, they're not consulted as to what is the best thing for football, what the future of football should look like. So in a way, maybe this is a catalyst to try and bring about some change. What that change is going to look like, I think we're yet to know. But it'll be interesting to see how UEFA and Stretford, the president, react to all of this in the next couple of days and couple of weeks. He has come out saying that he's going to be punishing the so-called Dirty Dozen. We just don't know how yet, what that's going to look like. Are they going to be kicked out of the Champions League next season? Personally, I don't think so, because at the end of the day, this is all about money and nobody wants to lose money. But perhaps it will have an effect in terms of how this new Champions League format from 2024 onwards is going to be reconfigured, because a lot of people don't seem to be quite happy with that either. And players have come out saying that, there's too many games and nobody even consults us and nobody asks us whether we want to have such a condensed schedule, because it does affect everybody. So if they play this right, it could be something really beneficial for everybody, from people like us, from the fans, to people in the media, to the footballers themselves, to the clubs, to the managers, back staff, and so on. But it's curious times, that's for sure. I think we're headed into slightly uncharted territories to see if something can come out of this that is going to make people happy.
No, I completely agree. It is uncharted times. Just finally, just one quick question on something you touched upon there. The Champions League, the revamped format, it's almost not quite gone under the radar with everything that's gone on. But you mentioned there that there's a lot of people are unhappy about that. We've heard players here in England speaking out against it. Do you think there'll be a lot of pushback from some of the Spanish teams over this new revamped format with more games and a sort of different system and this wild card entry as well? Do you think there will be a bit more pushback on the Champions League suggestions or plans?
That's a good question, because to be honest with you, as you say, because of everything that's happened, the revamped version of the Champions League has kind of been swept under the rug. No one's really talking about it. It's kind of been averted from the public eye. And this has kind of served in a way as a distraction to push the other thing through. I do think that now people will slowly start to turn their attentions to that. And people who have been taking a look at this, I haven't really seen anybody yet who is in support or who really likes the idea. Most people are saying, keep it as it is. It's a great format the way that it is. There's no need to add more games and to change things up. But again, it's all about the money, isn't it? So the idea is that they include more teams, they have more games, it brings about more revenue, and so on. But it's hard to I don't know, it's hard to argue for it when so many people who are behind the scenes in terms of the players and the managers are coming out and saying that they're against it. If they're against it, there's got to be a good reason behind it. And I'm sure most of it has to do with picking up injuries, physical fitness, whether they're going to be able to survive an entire season with the amount of games that are across so many different competitions. I imagine that there will start to be some pushback. In general, I think because, at least out of Madrid, based on the way that the club has been treated, there has been pushback against UEFA in general. The media in Barcelona has been a little bit quieter in that aspect. And I think in Spain in general, there hasn't really been too much talk about it. If anything, they're now more focused on Madrid's game tomorrow night against Chelsea in the Champions League now. But I think we're in for some interesting times ahead for sure. And it'll be interesting to see the reaction of the fans if they can actually try and push through some more changes with the Champions League or not.
Interesting times ahead. It's certainly been interesting times this last week, to say the least. Semra, it's great chatting to you as always. Thanks a lot for coming on the channel. And we'll catch up with you again soon. Who knows what's next in store, whether there is going to be another version, but we'll be sure to get your take on it. Thanks a lot for chatting to us.
Thanks. Have a good one. See you soon.
Too. Take care.
So big thanks again to Semra Hunter from La Liga TV's presenter over there for giving us the lowdown on the Spanish reaction to the disastrous Super League idea, plans, whatever you want to call them. It looks like it's dead in the water over here, but maybe, just maybe, there's a bit of life in it over in Spain, which just seems completely crackers to me. But we'll see how that all pans out. Don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to the channel, of course, and check out La Liga TV if you're looking to see what's going on over in La Liga, of course. I've been Jay Motti. This has been the One-on-One interview. Thanks for watching.